Hey guys, so this weekend was a little bit different than our typical weekends at Sun Valley. This weekend was a big celebration weekend. There are a bunch of times in the Bible that God, when it's the people of Israel, God will kind of take the leader aside, or God will speak to them and be like, okay, this day is a special day. This is a day that you're to remember, that you're to celebrate, that you're to look back on what God has done. And instead of just moving forward, I don't know if you're like me, where I tend to just look at the future and I tend to look at what's coming and I'm just taking it as it comes, but I'm not stopping to look back and to thank God. And so this weekend was a time for us as a church just to stop and to thank God for what He's done over these last few years as we've gone through this thing we called the next chapter. If you're newer to Sun Valley, you heard about it this weekend, but basically we just called the church to, hey, would you consider being a part of what God's going to do next at Sun Valley? And giving sacrificially, and a bunch of you did that. And so we just wanted to stop and say thank you to you, and then to say thanks to God, because God did what only God can do. He showed up in a big way. We had thousands of people say yes to following Jesus. We opened up our Queen Creek campus. We did a bunch of renovations and moved into a building down in Casa Grande, and across all of our campuses, we've seen transformation happen to facilities, but more importantly, we've seen God transform lives in those spaces. And so we just wanted to pause and say thank you. And so if you were a part of that, let me just, again, thank you. And if you weren't a part of it, that's okay. Maybe you're sitting here right now because you came to know Jesus over the last few years. Maybe you came to Sun Valley over the last few years. And that's because people care about you. People love you. And so people gave sacrificially because they knew that one day you would come to church when you were invited. They knew that one day you would get connected into a small group. They knew that one day God will get a hold of your life and do some great things. And so we look forward, yes, but we also pause once in a while to look back. When we did this series where we kind of kicked off the next chapter, Chad read this passage and read it again this last weekend. It's Acts 1:8. And this is Jesus talking. This is right before Jesus ascends into heaven. So he's already conquered death. The resurrection took place. The very first Easter happened. Everybody was pretty excited about it. Jesus gathers his disciples together, and before he ascends into heaven, he tells them this. This is kind of his last marching orders to the people. So he says to his disciples, "But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you. And you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the end of the earth." And then Jesus does his like Peter Pan up into heaven thing. And the church now is born as Jesus gave these marching orders. Here's what you're to do. You're to be my witnesses. Now, it's important what Jesus didn't say. He didn't say, you will be my salesman. You will be my salesperson. He doesn't say that. He says, no, you will be my witnesses. And what a witness does is a witness just tells people what they saw, what they heard. They just report, this is what I've witnessed. So what is it that Jesus is asking us to do when he says, you will be my witnesses? We're to tell people what Jesus has done in our life. And we're to provide space where that takes place. We're to do it in Jerusalem, which is our hometown. That for you, that's where you're sitting right now. We're to do that in Judea, the surrounding area, and communities maybe that are a little bit further out or a little bit distant. So Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and Samaria at the time when Jesus is talking, this is a group of people that are foreign to Jesus' disciples and people that they didn't often get along with. And Jesus says, no, you're to be witnesses to them. And then he says to the uttermost parts of the earth, which right now, where you're sitting would be, as Jesus was talking, the uttermost parts of the earth. This place wasn't even in the imagination of the disciples, but Jesus said, your witness of what you saw and what I've done in your life is going to go all the way to the ends of the earth. And now here we are 2,000 years later because the disciples did what Jesus told them to do. And so the baton has been passed, and now it's our turn to be witnesses, to continue to tell people what Jesus has done in our lives. And so as we pause and we look back at all that God's done, at the same time, it's also a reminder that God's not done, and there's still more people in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the uttermost parts of the earth, all around our community, in our cities, that don't know Jesus yet. And so as a small group, here's what I want to ask you to do. As a small group, if you would just kind of go around and talk about somebody who you could be a witness to. So think of one person who needs to hear about Jesus, that needs to meet, know, and follow Jesus. And then as a group, take time and pray that God might do something this year and maybe give you the opportunity to invite them to a series, maybe give you the opportunity to have a conversation about spiritual things, maybe have them over to your house and have a meal. But whatever that may be, pray that God would do something in that person's life and that you would have the courage to be a witness. Just tell them what God's done in your life. Maybe invite them to church. So, name of one person, and then as a group, why don't you guys take some time and pray for those people that God puts on your heart. Have a great small group. So glad you guys are on the journey, and keep going.